Hey everyone, welcome back to Nadlan Forum Podcast Daily. I'm Ruby Sturt, sitting here, as always, with Lior. And today's episode is one you do not want to miss. We're talking about that massive 20.5% jump in new home sales we saw in August. It's kind of wild, Lior. Literally the strongest sales numbers since January 2022. And honestly, with mortgage rates hovering above 6.5%, did anyone really see this coming?
I don't think anyone saw this coming, to be honest. The numbers from the Census Bureau were kind of a shock. New home sales going up 20% month to month. Look, I've seen crazy swings before, right? Both in Israel and in the US. But something like this, in the middle of high interest rates, it almost makes you wonder if it's sustainable or if this was some sort of, outlier month. Like Ruby, it reminds me a bit of what happened back in Tel Aviv a few years ago, when there was a sudden spike in sales after the government changed a few incentives and everyone rushed in before the rules changed. But it didn't last. The difference here is the mortgage rates in August, not even cheap. People were locking in at 6.63% on a 30-year fixed. Not exactly a bargain.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not a typo, folks. 6.63%. Most people blink and think, who would go for new construction in that rate environment? But they did. And this wasn't just like some random statistical blip either. It was the biggest 1 month gain since August 2022. And get this, it was up 15% from this time last year. So whatever's driving buyers, it's got to be something pretty powerful. Lior, does it feel to you like this is an American-only phenomenon? Or do you kind of see echoes of what happens in Israel too?
There's definitely some parallels. And sometimes you do see a burst of demand, especially when everyone's expecting rates to drop even more. Or there's this FOMO, fear of missing out. But I gotta say, in Israel, it's often government policy or land releases that create the spikes. In the States, it feels a bit more like builders are pushing demand, stacking incentives, timing price drops, maybe even creating urgency. I'm curious to see if this momentum can keep up, or if it's, just taking sales from the future and piling them into August. But, sales at these levels during high rates, it's almost counterintuitive.
And it sets up all those questions we're going to dig into today. Like, is this surge actually sustainable, or are we in for a rude awakening? Let's break down what's really behind those numbers, yeah? Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. Why did new home sales shoot up when mortgage rates were still, honestly, pretty brutal for buyers? Spoiler, it's all about the deals. Builders went all out. Nearly 40% of them, 39 to be precise, were cutting prices, Lior. That's the highest rate of price reductions we've seen from builders since the whole COVID craziness started calming down.
Yeah, and you could feel it in the market. Builders were giving away everything. Price cuts, free appliances, closing costs covered, you name it. Analyst Robert Dietz from the NAHB even said yeah, incentives moved inventory, but don't get too carried away. And then you have Ivy Zelman, one of the sharpest home builder analysts, honestly. She was more cautious. Her own numbers said the year-over-year jump was more like 6%, not 15%. So, not everyone agrees how big the boom really is. But everyone seems to agree that incentives are what's pushing people over the line.
Totally, and that lines up with what's happening on the ground. I'll throw in a personal story. My cousin in Brisbane, right? She's been on the fence for ages about buying a new build. She swore she'd waited out for rates to drop. But you know what got her off the fence? The builder threw in a kitchen upgrade, covered her stamp duty, and paid all her closing costs. She literally couldn't resist. So Australians, Americans, it really doesn't matter. Everyone loves a bargain, especially when it feels like you're beating the system a little, right?
And Ruby, I've seen the same here. When you're facing these high rates, a builder upgrade or a few thousand off can make a huge psychological difference. It's smart business. The builders know people are spooked by monthly payments. So instead, they take a chunk out of the price or add a bunch of perks. Suddenly, all these buyers who wouldn't have qualified or wanted to wait are saying, actually, maybe now is the moment.
Yeah, and as much as the data's a little fuzzy, because like you said, Lior, some experts hedge about the margin of error with these reports, the big takeaway's still super clear for me. Even in a high-rate environment, a good deal gets people moving. And Lior, as we talked about in one of our previous episodes, buyers these days are way more selective and they know when to pounce. This just proves it all over again, don't you think?
Absolutely. Buyers have gotten really smart. They wait for the right incentives and then they move. And we can debate if that's healthy for the market long term, but in the short run, it's definitely driving action. It's going to be really interesting to see if builders keep juicing sales with these offers or start pulling back now that mortgage rates have started to move a little too. Let's zoom in for a second on where the action really happened. So the Northeast and the South led the spike. Those regions had the strongest sales momentum, which, I'll be honest, surprised me a little. Usually it's the South, but the Northeast doesn't get this much attention. But then you look at the West and no, not the same story. High home prices in the West put the brakes on everything, even with all those builder incentives flying around.
It really comes down to local conditions, doesn't it? Like what works in Dallas or Atlanta might totally flop in LA just because of price points, inventory, and buyers' budgets. And speaking of inventory, this is wild. The supply of new homes dropped from 9 months in July to just 7.4 in August. That's a huge drop. But then on the flip, new construction starts and permits were actually down at the same time. So it's tightening up fast, but supply isn't keeping up. Lior, do you think that puts pressure on prices or maybe just makes buyers jumpy again?
It's a bit of both. Lower inventory means more competition, maybe higher prices or bidding wars. But if new building keeps slowing, it also means we could run out of new homes for people who want them. It's like the builders guessed demand would slow, so they started fewer homes. But then demand did the exact opposite and surged. Classic. Now the market's got to play catch up. And honestly, if rates drop again, maybe the demand spikes even more, unless builders stop going all in on incentives. That's a big if.
Exactly. And it raises the real mystery. Will builders keep up these wild incentives or pull back as rates drop? Do we keep this momentum or come the next data set, see it all flatten out? And maybe we'll get some answers next month, or maybe we're just in that Goldilocks window where everything's lining up. For now. Either way, there's a lot more to watch. All right, we'll wrap it there. Lior, thanks as always for hashing through all the chaos with me.
Thanks, Ruby. Always a pleasure. And to everyone listening, keep an eye on those incentives and local trends, and we'll be back with more updates soon. Have a great one.
You too, Lior. Cheers, everyone. See you next time on Nadlan Forum Podcast Daily. Bye for now.